Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to the second part of our two-part series covering more cases of murder in college dorm rooms. If you haven't seen part 1, be sure to check that out first. We'll leave a link in the description below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. With that out of the way, here is part 2 of 2 more chilling cases that took place in college dorms. In May of 2001, it seemed like life had nothing but good things in store for Kate Johnson. She had just finished her junior year at the University of Portland, and during her time there had discovered a lot about herself, as well as what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. The private Catholic university was a perfect match for the devoutly religious young woman, whose faith was the only thing more important to her than her family and her passion for music. After first enrolling for pre-med, she had switched to pursuing a major in music education, and was working towards becoming a high school music teacher after graduation. According to her friends and staff at the university, Kate was a self-effacing and caring person who was not afraid to go out of her way to help others. She spent countless hours on volunteer activities, working with low-income children, mentoring young girls, and teaching music. Characteristic of Kate's fondness for service was her decision to take a job with the university's volunteer office at the end of the spring semester. That May, she had become the manager of Mailing Hall, an 8-floor all-women's dorm on the University of Portland campus. Because classes weren't in session, Kate was just one of 2 women who were living in the dorms that summer, aside from the odd time when it was used to house attendees of conferences and reunions at the school. For the first little while, everything seemed to be going great. Kate enjoyed being on the campus and enjoyed helping out in the dorm. Uncharacteristically, she even agreed to go out to a bar with some friends to celebrate her 21st birthday on May 22nd, despite the fact that she did not drink. However, within just days of this fun night out, things would take a tragic turn. It began when a friend of Kate's went to find her in Mailing Hall on May 29th, after not seeing her for a little while. She planned to ask Kate if she was coming to the dining hall. However, when she arrived at Kate's second-floor dorm room, she found it locked and could not get any response from inside. Worried, the friend contacted campus police. When authorities entered the dorm room, they encountered a horrific scene. Kate's nude, lifeless body was lying face up in the middle of the room. She had been beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted. At the scene, investigators found bleach and a towel, suggesting a cleanup attempt. They also discovered marks on Kate's wrists, suggesting that she had been handcuffed during the terrifying assault. Thankfully, a DNA sample believed to belong to the killer was obtained from Kate's wrist, as well as a pillow in her room. Unfortunately, this sample did not match anyone in the state or federal database, and further extensive searches of Mailing Hall failed to turn up any new evidence. Aside from the unknown DNA, the only thing that investigators had to go on was the fact that there were no signs of forced entry into the residence or Kate's dorm room, suggesting that the killer was either a resident or, more likely, someone with a master key. Though news of Kate's murder shocked the university and the local community, the public was almost entirely shut out when it came to details about the investigation. For almost a year, the only substantial updates came in the form of leaked information to various media outlets, who published the scant facts much to the frustration and chagrin of investigators and the university. The first major update was a memo mistakenly released by the medical examiner's office, which noted that Kate's death had resulted from strangulation. The details were reported by the outlets the Vancouver Columbian and the Willamette Week. The second update came on August 17th, when the Oregonian reported that police were taking DNA samples from campus security officers, as well as any employees that were thought to have access to Mailing Hall. The leak was said to have come from a University of Portland employee, and was met with a furious response from the school's president, Reverend David Tyson, who sent a scathing email to faculty and students 4 days later, threatening to expel or fire anyone who was seen as jeopardizing the Kate Johnson investigation. Though Tyson claimed to be acting on behalf of law enforcement officers and the wishes of Kate's family, many, including faculty members at the university, were highly skeptical about the school's response, believing that high-ranking officials there were largely motivated by an effort to mitigate damage to the school's reputation. Tyson, in particular, had spent more than a decade building up the University of Portland's credibility within the academic world. When he arrived at the school in 1990, it was reportedly a middling and underfinanced institution. But by 2001, it was consistently ranked among the U.S. News and World Report's top 10 Western regional universities, and was competing for the area's top Catholic students. To many, it was obvious that people like Tyson thought the murder of Kate Johnson was a threat to the school's continued success. In the absence of any new information about the investigation, scrutiny continued to be placed on the school. Some of the more damning details were outlined in an article in the Willamette Week from April of 2002, which covered several areas of concern about the University of Portland's behavior. For starters, the report alleged that the school knew about possible safety concerns in Mailing Hall more than 2 months before Kate's murder. It turned out that sometime during the school's spring break, between March 10th and 20th, someone had gained access to 3 different student rooms in the dorm and had stolen items including jewelry, textbooks, and clothing. The crime shared 2 important parallels with the Kate Johnson murder. First, like the murder, the burglary had happened while classes were not in session. If the crimes were related, it suggested that the perpetrator was familiar with the school's academic calendar. Second, and more importantly, there was no sign of forced entry. Just like in Kate's case, police reports written immediately after the burglary theorized that whoever had committed the crime had gained entry with a master key. Not only had the public not been made aware of the burglary at the time that it happened, Kate's own father would later tell the media that he had not been informed about it following his daughter's murder. The situation was made even more damning by statements given to the press by the former head of security of the University of Portland. He insisted that despite constantly bringing it to the attention of the administration, for years leading up to the murder, they did not have good control over their keys, particularly master keys. He went on to say that not only did he not know how many master keys existed, there was probably no way to determine that number. The final scandalous detail concerning the school's handling of information related to the Vice President of Student Services, John Goldrick, who was the point person on the murder case for the school. In an interview with the Portland Tribune, journalists revealed that they had discovered that there actually was one additional person staying in Mailing Hall at the time that Kate was murdered. A priest named David Attacallum. The fact that the school had omitted this information when speaking with the public was seen as highly suspicious, and it only got worse when Goldrick claimed that he had initially not known the information, following it up by saying that when he had been told, he had withheld it in order to shield the priest from the media and potentially from the murderer. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the investigation into Kate's death had more or less hit a dead end. DNA tests from all campus security officers and employees were not a match to the sample found at the crime scene, nor were any other DNA samples they had obtained up until that point. Even the priest, who it seemed had been suspiciously hidden from the investigation, was eventually ruled out after providing a DNA sample. As desperation in the case grew, police expanded the circle of people that they interviewed and solicited more DNA tests from acquaintances of Kate's, or students and others who might have been on the campus at the time. Finally, in June of 2003, investigators got the news that they had been waiting for. One of the samples they had collected was a match to the unknown sample at the crime scene. The DNA had been taken from a 30-year-old man named Deniz Aydiner, a Turkish citizen who had formerly attended the University of Portland. Though he had stopped taking classes there in the spring of 1999, he lived in a house nearby and continued to be a regular on campus because he had many friends there. Aydiner was also an acquaintance of Kate's. The two didn't know each other well, but had mutual friends at the school. With this information in hand, authorities re-questioned friends of Kate's about anything they remembered around the time of her death. Shockingly, they told investigators that on the night that they had gone out to celebrate Kate's birthday at a local bar, there had been a loud altercation between a man and his girlfriend there. The two had argued, and the man had shouted at the woman, seeming to be extremely controlling over her. When Kate saw this, she had reportedly tried to stand up for the woman and angered the man further. The man turned out to be Denise Adener. Though investigators now believed that they had everything they needed to tie the case together, they soon realized there was a potentially insurmountable obstacle in their way. Though he was still living in the US when they had collected his DNA in February of 2003, Adener had since gone back to Turkey because his visa had expired. For a moment, it seemed that it may be impossible to ever get him back on US soil. Luckily, it turned out that Adener had married his girlfriend before leaving the US, and at the time the DNA match was found, had applied for another visa to get back into the country. Unbeknownst to Adener and his wife, authorities collaborated to expedite the process and made sure they knew his flight plan for getting back to Portland. When Denise Adener got off the plane in Oregon on January 16, 2004, he was escorted by immigration officials to a conference room. Investigators from Portland were waiting inside and reportedly set up pictures of Kate Johnson, so it would be the first thing that he saw when he walked in. According to one of the detectives on the case, Adener looked shocked when he realized what was happening. Though Adener denied everything, he did admit to knowing Kate and crucially stated that he had seen her a few days before her death at the bar. At the same time, a search warrant was served at the home where he had previously lived with his wife. Amazingly, investigators were able to recover the jewelry that had been stolen from the dorm rooms in Mailing Hall back in March of 2001, as well as the handcuffs they believed had been used to restrain Kate, offering further evidence that Adener was behind both crimes. The master key theory was also confirmed, as authorities soon learned that Adener had been given a key by a friend on campus security. Once in custody, Adener was indicted on 17 felony charges, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, burglary, and 2 different sexual assault offenses. Though he never admitted to what he had done, he eventually took a plea deal, pleading no contest to several of the most serious charges. In February of 2006, Denise Adener was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 37 years. A subsequent appeal that Adener filed, alleging that U.S. officials had used trickery and deceit to lure him back to the country, was rejected by the Oregon Court of Appeals in 2009, and he remains incarcerated at the Oregon State Penitentiary to this day. In the years since the crime took place, it seems that at least one member of Kate's family has been able to find some semblance of closure. Her mother, Edie Hagstrom, was able to confront Adener before he was incarcerated. During that exchange, she told him that she forgave him, and that his heinous crime would never take the beautiful memories that she had of her daughter away from her. She also said that she hoped he had a long life, where he had to think about what he had done every day. Perhaps the most heartbreaking detail of all in the case is a journal entry that was shared by Edie that her daughter had written just days before her death. In the final entry in the book, Kate wrote that her life was incredibly blessed, and that her prayers were only with others. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.